as we grew our audience to tens of thousands of people, we asked them, like, what product do you wish existed in the beauty industry? 98% said hyperpigmentation and dark circles were their number one beauty concern. So it was 3 years after I had this viral video. There was still an audience waiting for a product to be made to kind of solve for this. Birthed our first product, which was the Hue Stick. And it's now won 3 Allure Best of Beauty Awards and centered around this idea of creating products for people who hadn't seen themselves represented in the beauty industry.
Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by Creator IQ. Here's Conor Begley.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earned. Today, I've got Deepica on the show today. Welcome, Deepica.
Thanks for having me. We finally made it happen.
Yeah, we're making it happen. And actually, well, let's start with just who you are, right? So I think for those that don't know you, Deepica is the founder and CEO of Live Tinted, which is an amazing brand, is doing very, very well. She's also a very accomplished content creator with hundreds of thousands of fans across multiple platforms, TikTok, Instagram, etc. Congrats again on all the personal success.
Thank you. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to sit back and actually appreciate what you've done.
So one of the things I'd actually like to start at is kind of how you define yourself. Because I asked this before we started, how did you want to be referred to? And it sounds like that's changed over time. So talk to me about that evolution in terms of your definition.
I think it all goes back to, like many things, my immigrant parents. And I just feel like the identity of a YouTuber, which is how I started in this whole world, or influencer or content creator, didn't feel like something they would respect because I didn't understand it. And so being the company CEO was an identity that I held on to really tightly. And even when my video went viral on YouTube, I would tell them I was a Today Show beauty expert because being on TV was credible, but content creator to them, and again, this was 2015. So it's it was an identity that was really hard for me to hold on to, but now have done lots of work and realized the power. I mean, truly, the brand is as strong as it is because of the power of content creation. And so I'm finally at a place where I not only own it, but I'm proud of it. And honestly, even the CEO thing, right? That was something else I held on to really tightly because I felt like women needed to see more female CEOs out there. And I felt like I was doing it for that reason versus what brings me joy, what I felt like my strength was. That part I'm still unpacking. But yeah, as of right now, I'm the founder of Live Tinted. I'm the CEO and also a content creator.
So which parts of being a CEO do you not like?
I think that I'm really hard on myself. And I think the people piece, it holds such a weight on me. It's people's lives. They chose, and I don't take it lightly when people decide to come to Live Tinted, especially most people have left really big brands to come work for us, right? And I don't know, there's something so heavy about that for me that I recently hired a president and everyone reports into her and she's the only one who reports into me. And I feel like I'm living in my superpower more because I don't have all this. I'm such an empath already that I just care so much. And I used to, again, be scared to say that out loud, but it's who I am.
Honestly, it's very similar to the journey that I went through. At the time that we hit around 50 employees, 60 employees, I had 70% of the team reporting into me, but I was on the road all the time. So I wasn't there when they needed help or guidance or trying to help them or whatever. And realized also that for me personally, that wasn't actually where I felt like my superpowers were, so to speak. And so I ended up rolling up kind of all the day-to-day reporting and the internal management into my partner, John. And then I started handling everything external. So whether that was press, investors, clients, all that kind of stuff, right?
It's a really good point what you said about not being there. That's such a huge part of it too, is for me, it was physically, I was always traveling everywhere, literally like you said, doing press or whatever it is, meeting with investors. But on top of that, I just felt this weight on me, this switching, going back and forth within 1 hour, a board meeting to a one-on-one with an employee to doing a podcast and then filming a TikTok. Going back and forth like that was just very confusing. So that was another piece of it. It was just living in my superpower full time is actually the goal.
Yeah, I think if you look at the brands that have done this well, right, the brands that were founded by a creator, you typically have somebody that's either in a president role or a CEO role or somebody that is managing kind of the day-to-day, managing finance, managing internal operations. Because again, the reality is that if you want to be good on the other side of the world, right? If you want to be good on the content creation side, like you're Mariana at Summer Fridays or you or whoever, or Dibs, right? That's a full-time job in and of itself, let alone everything else.
And I have to say, Mariana was one of the people who told me very early on, she was like, I don't want to be the CEO, because when they got it very early, like in the first year, right? And because she just knew, she was like, I need to be out there living in what I'm great at, which is she's one of the best content creators out there. And so between her and Jessica Alba, I remember Jessica Alba said the same thing to me. She was like, why do you want to be the CEO? And then she also said, which I thought was really valuable, you saying you don't want to be an influencer is like me saying I don't want to be known as starting as an actress. That's what got me started. That's what got me the platform. And shying away from that is shying away a part of your identity, which is the whole reason people invested in you. I will say the little difference there is like, specifically with me, since I was a little girl, I wanted to create this brand. Like I was 16 years old and this was like my dream. And so for me, control over it was important. And so I think like being the CEO and being the final decision maker at this stage in the business makes sense for me. But like I said, I brought in a president to handle people. You can structure it any way you want. And so I thought that was interesting. I'm still learning though.
What's interesting about your journey as a creator and as an influencer is in some ways that part almost feels like it was a little bit more accidental, right? Like not everybody's going to know the story of like how you got started and really went viral on YouTube and then what happened from there.
So I was an early employee at Birchbox and I was there for 3 years at the time. And I always told the founders that my goal was to one day start my own beauty brand. And before I was at Birchbox, I was working at Limited Brands and it was in Columbus, Ohio. So I had a lot of time. And when I was there, I started a blog. So I was doing this just for fun because my passion really is the beauty industry. But again, I had to be a corporate girl. Like that's what made sense in my parents' minds. Therefore, in my mind, for me to do this as a hobby, not as a full-time career. And so that's kind of how it happened was like while I was at Birchbox, they saw my blog and they were like, you should start doing content for us. And I had this hack that there was just no business priority reason to make it a priority for them. So I was like, you know what? There's nobody who looks like me on YouTube. So instead of waiting for this company to do it for me, I'm just going to start my own channel, share a tip that I think could be helpful for at least people who look like me, if nothing else. And, you know, we're a fourth of the world. So I figured somebody would resonate with this. And if nothing else, I enjoy it. It really was like a fun hobby for me. And so January of 2015, I picked up my iPhone and filmed a video vertically instead of horizontally, uploaded it on YouTube vertically. So it, you know, it has black panels on the side, using a red lipstick under my eyes to mask dark circles, which was a beauty hack that like I taught myself from seeing a makeup artist use an actual color corrector on me on set that helped mask my extreme dark circles. And at the time, BuzzFeed was like the TikTok of virality back in the day, but it changed my life. Like BuzzFeed picked it up and all of a sudden the video went from 100 views to when it hit 100,000 views, I was like, oh my God, this is going to hit 1 million. Crazy.
You've got a decision at that point, like which path do I go, right? Do I go the Birchbox, kind of more the corporate path and really lean all in on the influencer side or creator side? What was that decision making like?
It was an email from the Today Show when I was at 4 million views. They asked me to come on to do the segment on air. And that day I went to my CEO and told her I'm quitting. It was like the sign I was looking for, I think, that like I could do this. And the noise around me was just really heavy. I mean, everyone was like, you don't go on the Today Show and become a regular. Like, it's a cool moment in your life. Like, do I take this 15 minutes of fame and just take it for what it is or spin it into my dream career? And I did the latter and everything kind of took off from there.
I have to imagine that like those kinds of moments happen pretty rarely, right? That you go that viral. So I would imagine it was more of a kind of slow and steady build from there in terms of building your audience, finding your voice, finding the right kind of content.
Yeah. So after that happened, you know, I went from 0 to 10,000 subscribers. I didn't have my ad revenue activated. So I lost a couple thousand, which sucked. Like, I didn't expect this, right? Like, it was my second video ever posted, but nobody plans for it. So I was just like, I'll figure it out as I go. Eventually, creators end up making their money from brand deals over revenue on ad dollars, depending on, you know, how often you're posting and stuff like that. But at that time, it would have been great. I got to 0 to 10,000, which was great because that unlocked access to the YouTube studios. I was living in New York at the time. And so I think just for me, since I'm such an extrovert, there was this like loneliness of being self-employed and being this content creator in a world that like hadn't been defined. And again, this was 2015 and I knew how to be a businesswoman, but to be this content creator, like it was literally being defined in real time. So there wasn't actually many people to even go to, let alone people who look like me to get advice and guidance. And obviously my parents and family don't even understand at all what I'm doing. So it really is a lonely journey, you know? So I think going into the YouTube studios was really nice because at least I got to be around other creatives and I filmed some of my videos there, but honestly it was more just to like get out and not just be in this like hole like of just waking up and thinking now what? You know, you had to be super self-motivated to say I'm going to film another tutorial and then luckily everyone was wrong and this one Today Show experience did turn into me going on regularly and doing segments for them, which was awesome because again, you get this different kind of credibility, especially at that time around being an on-air beauty expert versus being a YouTuber. It is really nice to have family support, especially it's so many people generally, but specifically I think South Asian people, you know, they come to this country with expecting us to get a very traditional job like doctor, lawyer, engineer. And so I think it's really refreshing for me to know that like my parents are my number one support system because I think in those very dark lonely times to know at least you have family support, it really was valuable.
Honestly, I've actually fully embraced that like being validated is something that I value. I mean, another way of positioning it is like my love language is like words of affirmation, like that's one of them,
That sounds so much better.
right?
And I like that you own it and it is important. It's like you need these moments to keep going almost. Like
Embrace it. Why not? It is great like when your parents are proud and they're excited for what you're doing and stuff. You've actually started integrating them into the content now, right? Like your family, at least more broadly. When did that kind of transition happen that you're like, let's start getting the whole crew involved?
for me, my goal was always to change stigmas around representation and just generally around the South Asian narrative. Like, I feel like that was always what I cared about doing because it's something I just didn't have. Like, there wasn't nobody to look to on TV to feel like I could also go do that. And so for me, the parent piece was so important because I was so embarrassed of my parents growing up. Like, I didn't want friends to come to my house because I was worried about the way it would smell. Now everyone wants to come over from my mom's dosas. It's just interesting to see like how it's changed. But I guess I just felt like if I can show my parents and create this very relatable content, there has to be other people out there that can relate to this. And turns out I was right. But as much as I am a businesswoman, it was less strategic and more authentic. And that's how the beauty hack that went viral happened. It was a tip that I was doing. So I kept sharing beauty hacks. And then I incorporated my family. And actually, I'll be honest that I don't consider myself a makeup artist. So doing makeup videos 24/7 was like numbing to my brain. What I liked more was like vlogging, like showing my life and just kind of creating this come on the journey with me feeling. And so that's really where I got my parents involved because I had more joy being myself in a personality on camera more than sitting there and coaching and teaching people makeup tips, which I think people related with me because it was very relatable makeup, but also because of that, you kind of just want to change it up. Like, I just want to keep being relatable in every part of my life, not just pigeonholed into makeup. But it's tough because that's kind of how the content creator world works is you're known for something and people come to you for that reason. And then that's why brands come to you. And so I became the go-to brown girl for all makeup campaigns for a couple years. And it was really cool.
Yeah. What's funny about kind of all the different pieces that you've talked about is when we look at what causes influencers to grow, because we've separated them out, looked at high growth and slow growth, it's consistently doing it, right? So posting a lot, right? They post higher volume, high growth influencers, which again, you're like, I'm doing this full time. This is what I'm doing. They actually post less branded content, 23% less branded content. So similar to you, they get bored. Like, I can't just do another flat lay, like another tutorial, another whatever. And they tend to be part of communities, right? So they like build friends and they grow together. The vast majority of people that try to do this do not get to the level that you are at today. What do you think it is that they do wrong, or what is it that you think you got right that caused you to have the success that you've had?
It's even hard for me to say because it's changed obviously so freaking much. Like, it's so hard now. But what I did right that I think still is valuable advice for today is so much collaboration, like you had spoken to. I basically went to not just other content creators. Quite honestly, I didn't really have that network, especially in New York. And why would they care to get to know me? Like, I was still very small. So what I actually did was go to brands, and I had all these brand contacts from my time at Birchbox. And so I would just email them. Like, I connected better with the marketing manager at brands than I did with a influencer. So I would become friends with the people at brands and we would do content. And at that time, if Maybelline tagged me, I grew like 5,000. So I would just do free content with them and not ask them to pay me. Or if they did pay me, it was like 500 bucks or something small. It's that ripple effect of, well, Maybelline wants to work with her, L'Oreal wants to work with her, then MAC wants to work with her, Laura Mercier wants to work with her, Beauty Blender wants to work with her. I mean, these are all real brands that did work with me. And it's just crazy to think like that's really what did it for me was in the beginning, it was collaborating with the brands and doing free content. And I wouldn't advise that these days. And honestly, brands don't even go there these days because they're not trying to get canceled. I do believe at the time social currency was real. Like, I do think there was value of like Patrick Todd doing Gigi Hadid's makeup for free and growing 100,000 people because instead of getting his rate, she posted him and then the views skyrocketed, right? For me, that was the exact same thing. Instead of paying me $500, give me a post that tags me, and then all of a sudden your millions of followers will start following me. That was real back then. I don't think so much now.
We still see it in the data in terms of community. That's actually what I was referring to. So like how often you are tagged by other influencers and other brands is also like high growth influencers get tagged a lot more often, right? Like twice as often. It seems like people in general, and I don't know if this is like a Reels TikTok thing, but like on TikTok, a follow doesn't matter as much anymore. Like I follow you, but I don't see your content that much more. So I feel like in general, it's de-emphasized following, which I think has caused people to not grow as fast in general.
Especially on TikTok. I've had many videos get 10 million views on TikToks and I grew 0 followers.
Let's do this last question on the content side. And then I really want to talk about Live Tinted for a bit. So obviously you started on YouTube, right? Really kind of emphasized there. Have dialed back that quite a bit and really focused on TikTok and Instagram, it seems like primarily. How do you see that going forward? Like, where are you spending your time? I know that you're now committing to creating content a bit more recently than you were maybe a couple of years ago. So talk to me about what does the future look like? What are you thinking about?
Earlier this year, I did 3 months in a row of posting weekly YouTube videos. I have my most loyal audience there. That's how I got started. And they're global. It's not just in the US. And so I was like, I want to reignite like the loyalists that supported me since day one. So I did a weekly video every Sunday, just like I used to back in the day for 3 months straight. It's hard to see the ROI out of it. Like the time, the cost, the effort versus just doing shorts and like just filming everything vertically and creating the same content for TikTok, Instagram, and Reels. And I think my step one is just getting that going again on a regular basis, like a daily basis, because you have to feed it on a daily basis consistently to make the growth happen. I just can't see the benefit for a creator to focus on long form YouTube videos. YouTube just isn't incentivizing creators the same way it used to be. And I have several friends who are OG YouTubers who are just like, we're out. Instead of doing original long form YouTube videos, I did just uploaded my TikToks to shorts and I actually grew in followers that way. So it was like, what reason do I have to do the long form?
Yeah. I mean, we see it in the data, right? Like, I think right now, if you look at the 3 channels, just like the last 6 months, TikTok's growing the fastest, but Instagram's actually picking up quite a bit the last like 6 months, particularly through Reels. And then YouTube's really slowed down, particularly in the beauty and fashion space.
It kind of makes me think of like when Instagram started and everyone was like, oh, Facebook is dead. And it's like, no, it's actually not. It's thriving like crazy, but for a different audience. And now I'm feeling that same way about TikTok versus Instagram. Everyone on TikTok is like, Instagram's dead. And it's like, no, it's actually like still probably driving a lot more in totality in terms of like revenue for brands. But TikTok has the most virality and potential growth. So it's like, you got to kind of do both.
Instagram's volume is higher, but to your point, I think it's a new audience, right? It's a new group of people, which is good. So talk to me about Live Tinted. So this has been your dream since you're 16. I'm so excited to do it. How did you actually get started? Like, who did you work with in the early days?
So when my video went viral, I got approached by several people to create a color corrector because they were like, 10 million people wanted your red lipstick. Let's create a lipstick that gets sold. And so obviously very tempting, but it was also a lot of predatory deals. Like we see this girl and, I think a lot of content creators will admittedly say they're not business savvy people. They're these incredible artists and great minds that need to be focused on that, which is obviously why agents and managers exist. But like for me, I'm more of a businesswoman than the other side of things. So I just knew that all of these opportunities in front of me were going to, in the long term, bite me in the butt for my bigger dream. So I ended up just leaning all the way into content creation and partnering with existing brands to promote their color correctors. And so I did a series with Sephora and I did all those things. So that's how it got started. And then basically after 3 years of doing this, I was like, got approached by another person who's actually a great, wonderful guy. He had started a company and sold it for hundreds of millions of dollars. And he got introduced to me to say, I have a daughter who's half Indian and I think it's important to create a brand for her. And I really loved that. I wanted this to be my company, not to be the face of someone else's company. To be very honest, I will say in hindsight, now that I'm looking at the center brands, I don't know if you've talked to Ben Bennett yet, but he is a mastermind at brand building, Naturium, Fleur. The only reason I'm bringing this up is to say, I think not starting from scratch and on your own is the way to go for everybody. And I think once you realize you raise the money and what kind of equity you end up with after all is said and done, if you start it with somebody else, you start to realize that really just focusing in on your strengths is actually what matters versus this like ego of like, well, I must own this percentage of the company. Because somebody said this to me and I was so pissed about it, which is why I didn't go with the deal. They said like, well, a small piece of something big versus a big piece of something small is always better. And that just pissed me off because you were just assuming I was building something small. And so I ended up building it all by myself. But I do think a lot of content creators partnering with incubators could be really smart, especially for those who know that they're the creative and they want to focus on that.
It's shocking I haven't met Ben before or even heard his name before. I've had Susan on the podcast. We've worked with Naturium for a long time. There are other people that are doing similar stuff. Like if you look at Ken Landis and Dan, who are the co-founders of Tula. Ken also co-founded Bobby Brown. He's a big investor. They co-founded Dibs together. Similar kind of studio model, right?
But I think for me, like when I got started, it was like, okay, I've been doing the influencer thing for 3 years. This guy is about to start this brand. It was every sign I needed to say it's time to hit go and get this thing going. And so I needed somebody I trusted to start this business with that I also thought was a really smart person. So my cousin and I started the company together. Quite honestly, he's never done the beauty industry himself. Really smart guy that I trusted who just will figure shit out. And at that time, you kind of just need to figure things out and be smart and resourceful. And I knew how to get all the right contacts together. Once we got them, you handle all the like contracts and like how we're going to actually make money off this stuff. So that's kind of what we did. And me and him got together and we started Live Tinted intentionally as a community platform. And what that really meant for me was like creating a separate identity around it for the brand that wasn't Deep Beauty or Deepica Inc. or something like that. Like I wanted to do everything I can to support it, but I wanted it to outlive me, similar to like Mariana Summer Fridays. You probably hear this from all the people you speak to. I wanted to connect people from different backgrounds that felt like they hadn't seen themselves represented in the beauty industry. I had yet to come across somebody that was South Asian with a deeper, beautiful melanated pigment skin tone on the internet in any capacity. So I asked my audience and I said, hey guys, if you can find a photo of somebody who is South Asian with a deeper skin tone, use hashtag Live Tinted on it. I'm working on a project. Within, I'm not even kidding, 30 minutes, hundreds of people using hashtag Live Tinted because it was so clear to me that there was groups and audiences of people that were dying to be seen and heard. And that really was the birth of the very first Live Tinted post ever. It was community sourced photo of the gorgeous, beautiful South Asian woman with a deeper skin tone who ended up being in our first campaign a year later. But we just started with her photo and said, like, let's discuss. Why is it so hard to find us on the internet? And then day after day, we would create this like weekly email newsletter, eventing, and then this social media channel that people daily came to see what the discussions were. And this was like, 2018. So it was like pre-BLM when I feel like all of a sudden the world was then caring about talking about the narratives of people of color and specifically Black people. But we were doing it before then. And it's honestly my just genuine story of like, why was I never seen and why were Black and brown women never seen? And so that's literally how it started. And then as we grew our audience to tens of thousands of people, we asked them, like, what product do you wish existed in the beauty industry? 98% said hyperpigmentation and dark circles were their number one beauty concern. So it was 3 years after I had this viral video. There was still an audience waiting for a product to be made to kind of solve for this. Birthed our first product, which was the Hue Stick. And it's now won 3 Allure Best of Beauty Awards and centered around this idea of creating products for people who hadn't seen themselves represented in the beauty industry.
I think that narrative, there's a whole kind of era of brands that were built on that principle. And I think, obviously have had a really tough time in general, particularly in the public markets. And they've realized that actually there is a lot of value to retail outside of just a pure volume on the sales side. It ends up being like a marketing channel, right? Because people can go touch you, feel you, see you in person. There's also validation too, right? Like this is a brand that is carried or validated by Sephora or by Ulta or whatever. So yeah, how did that process go? Kind of the idea of getting into retail and, how have you thought about that over time?
In the moment, it was so scary, so terrifying, like anxiety driving all the time, going to pitch to Sephora, going to pitch to Ulta. I just think you have to like lean into the retailer that's the most excited about you. When we were pitching to both of them, the kind of just way Ulta was said they would get behind us and really believed in the brand vision and mission versus at the time when we had pitched Sephora, they just kept saying, you guys have work to do. You need to land the plane on certain things. And not to say they were wrong, by the way, like they're the best in class merchants, some of the best in the world. And so it's like, you guys are clearly so pumped about us right now and want to grow and scale with us. And they, to this day, Ulta has been the most incredible partner. I mean, we just launched our brand new product and we had a front of store tower. For a brand that's not a multi-billion-dollar brand, to get that, it's a really big deal. And so to me, it's like, get behind the retailer that gets behind you in a big way. And that's what they did. To this day, like I did a collab with Naturalizer and Dave, the CEO of Ulta, emailed me and he was like, Deepica, congrats on being on the cover of WWD with Naturalizer. I was like, thanks, Dave. See you at FLC.
I love Dave. He is shockingly or surprisingly deep in the details. Like, how do you have time for this? And he's like doing store tours and like...
He's always at a store.
Right?
You feel the culture comes from the top, right? Like it's such a warm Midwest energy that comes from the Ulta team. We're growing with them in a way that's kind of a dream for me. So, and then the person I hired as my president made the world of a difference for us. She was the former VP at Tula who scaled them to exit through Ulta and brought her in as our chief commercial officer. And now she's our president because she's brilliant and amazing. And you realize when you are a Ulta-led brand, you need somebody who understands the Ulta machine better than anybody. And it's been a game changer.
Yeah, it's fun when you find those team members. It's shocking how much they can get done. There's like a half dozen people at the company that like I lose sleep over, like, oh God, please don't leave. Like, how do I make sure they don't leave? Like,
I had that question for you. It's like, exactly that. You have this feeling, but also you can't live in fear around it. And the rock stars, you also, if they want to leave, you want to support their decision to leave, because I actually have had experiences in the past where I didn't get that support, and it's something I'll never forget. And I actually told myself, I never want to be that boss. If somebody wants to leave, I want to help them get to their next chapter, because it actually benefits nobody if they're not like in it anymore, right?
I think the way that I've approached this, similar to you, like I don't want them to feel bad about leaving. Nobody's going to work at this company for the rest of their lives, including me, more than likely, right? It will happen eventually. And I think from a purely just like a rational perspective, I think the way that you treat people when they leave has a big impact on whether they might want to come back. Usually when somebody's like crushing it at your company, that's because there's a good fit between them and the company and the problem, right? And so like they're just in a groove, they're doing well. And maybe something happens, there's a reason for them to want to leave or whatever. But the number of people we've had boomerang and come back is like crazy, right? And so it's really important. It makes it so that if it doesn't work out wherever they go, it's much easier to be like, actually, I really liked what I was doing. I'd like to make these changes, but I really enjoyed the company. So
I find that the main reason people leave is because of management. Like people stay long because they love the person they report into, and they leave because they don't like the person they report into. So I'm learning all these things, but I think the best thing I did was hire somebody who's better at it than me.
Smart. That's a good lesson to learn. Well, let's do one last question on Tinted specifically. So I'm curious, were there any like unexpected challenges that occurred like as you were building the company? Or has there been anything in particular that you're like, we've had several like near death moments or really tough moments, anything like that that you've gone through, and then maybe what you learned during that?
I think the toughest part of building a company is the actual emotional piece of it rather than the actual like, will we run out of money? Will this employee quit? Will this product take off? Will the whole world shut down? And then it did. I think it's just a really weird psyche to go through to go from the highs to the lowest lows within hours of the same day. It's just the lack of stability, I think, is probably like the hardest part with the Live Tinted side of things. But I have to say, once you cross, I think, the 8-figure kind of revenue mark, you do feel a little bit of stability. There's just different phases, right? Carol Hamilton from L'Oreal said this to me very early on. The hardest is the first million and then to hit the 10 million. Because once you've kind of operationally figured out how you're getting to the 10 million, it's not a walk in the park to get to 50. You've kind of operationally figured out where you're at to kind of get you to that next milestone. I think for me, we are now on the other side of things where things are going really well. We have figured it out. It's been 5 years. We're celebrating our 5-year anniversary this May. And I think those 5 years of just lack of stability is really what it is. I can't even pinpoint one moment because it was like every year, every month, every week, there was something that was just like this roller coaster of this up and down.
Yeah, it is. I can't remember that there's different terms for it, but it's consistent with my experience. And I think a lot of it too is when you found a company, it becomes so deeply intertwined with your identity. The performance of the company is a reflection of you, right? As the company wins, I succeed. As the company fails, I fail, right? Most people can have that disconnect, right? Healthy disconnect, because it's a job, right? And I think as a founder, it's just different, unfortunately. So you feel it more too.
I actually have a few founder friends who have advised that. They were like, if you leave for 3 weeks and come back and things are not on fire, then maybe it's because like there is a stage where I keep hearing that founders are actually slowing things down versus like letting the company operate and move forward. So I think it's about knowing what role I should be playing for the company at this new stage as we scale.
Yeah, I saw somebody on Twitter that was like, basically like abdicated as CEO for a few months just to see what would happen, like just barely stayed in touch and like kind of let it run as it would run. And he's like, it's doing way better. So he's like, I don't know what this says about me or what this says about CEOs, but like maybe this is the right way to do it.
But I think it is so important because all my friends who are on the other side of selling their business went through like deep resurgences of who they are, like who am I outside of this brand? So I think like doing the work in real time is important for me also because again, you know, everybody says it's about the journey, not the destination, but they say it when they're on the other side of the destination of the exit or the whatever. If that really is true, I'm trying to every day wake up now with joy in my job and recognize this is the fun part. And I think when you hire a team to do the things you're not great at, you can kind of get there. And I do feel like at this stage, I'm like the happiest I've been because the team is in a great place.
It's a weird thing. I mean, we sold our company 2.5 years ago. Now we rolled a lot of equity, right? So we still have a lot of shares in the new company. It was the most money I've ever gotten in my life, right? And so you do come out on the other side with a little bit of like, what is next? Now, realistically, I think what is next for us is John, my co-founder, actually just took over as CEO of the company. So it's really kind of, let's take this now, the company that bought us, and see where we can take it. But I think it's easy, you know, when you come out on the other side and you've got millions of dollars to be like, yeah, this stuff doesn't actually matter. But like, I don't know, kind of does.
You said you have kids, right? Like a lot of founders don't at all focus on their personal life. I'm one of them. And so I think it's like interesting place to be if you do sell your business and then you come into all this wealth and then who's it going to be enjoyed with? Where are the kids? Where are the things, you know? So it's like, how do you really make sure both are prioritized? And I don't think I could have until this point. I wouldn't have been a good partner to anybody. I wouldn't have, you know what I mean? So I just think everyone's journey is obviously different. But I think the most important part is like when you are on the other side and you have all this like wealth that you can enjoy and you want, at least for me, it's only fun if you have people to share it with.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I really appreciate you taking out the time today. Congrats again on all the personal success and the success of the brand. It's really inspiring to see from the outside. And I know that you're making your parents very proud, regardless of whether they know what you actually do day to day. Good luck at your next interview and appreciate you again taking out the time.
Thanks, Connor. Thank you.
Bye.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by Creator IQ. Creator IQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at creatoriq.com.